NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.
Hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. The left continues to ramp up its attacks on our president, and it's now getting even worse after the president nominated a constitutional conservative to the Supreme Court. Watch the cable news networks and read your local paper. It's game on. In fact, in their eyes, it's all-out war.
Attacks the most American of all companies.
Actually agrees with Putin, and I think that's one of the more disturbing aspects of all of this.
Leader of Montenegro, that our president is shoving out of the way so we can pull in front of him. Our president showing his character in a very visceral way.
The media will lie to you about who President Trump is and what motivates him. They will talk about his ego and greed. I have a very different idea about who Donald Trump is, what motivates him, what guides him. Liberals get the answers to all those questions wrong. Sometimes they ask the questions just so they can get it wrong, to try to sway your mind and twist your mind. Your opinion of President Trump, that's what they're trying to twist. I'm here to tell you Donald Trump's brilliance is in his simplicity. He is a streetwise entrepreneur who demands excellence and refuses to accept lame excuses as an excuse for failure. The fact is, Donald Trump is a winner. That's clear. I can also tell you what motivates him. Success does. I know Donald Trump measures his own success by his victories, but because I have seen President Trump's generosity, I know his quest to make America great again is born out of a love of this country. We know Donald Trump isn't some wonky constitutional scholar. Even he will acknowledge that, but he does respect it.
The Supreme Court is entrusted with the safeguarding of the crown jewel of our republic, the Constitution of the United States. In keeping with President Reagan's legacy, I do not ask about a nominee's personal opinions. What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require.
Of course, he values the Constitution, but he sees its worth not in the words of freedom written on its paper, but the freedom it provided him, the opportunity it provided him, the guide that allowed him to reach all the levels of success he has. Donald Trump lives the American dream. I truly believe he's now guided by a strong desire to pay back the nation that provided him the opportunity to turn the son of a successful businessman into a billionaire and ultimately the president of the United States. His ego isn't why he wants success for America and his presidency and beyond. His ego is why failure isn't an option for him. Don't confuse the two. The left does. Strength is the other quality that guides this president. He knows strength wins. Enemies who fear you will think twice about crossing you. Simplicity and strength. That is President Trump. It strikes me as no coincidence that simple and strong is exactly what our founding fathers envisioned America should be. I want to share with you what Chris Cox, the executive director of the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action, had to say about Brett Kavanaugh. President Trump has made another outstanding choice in nominating Brett Kavanaugh for the U.S. Supreme Court. He has an impressive record that demonstrates his strong support for the Second Amendment. On behalf of our 6 million members, the NRA strongly supports Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the U.S. Supreme Court. Liberals have been quick to condemn the president's pick. Our own Kerry Pickett talked to liberal senators about Judge Kavanaugh and why they're battling so hard to stop him. Listen to her conversation with our old pal, Illinois Senator Dickie Durbin.
Senator McConnell is accusing you guys of being essentially chicken littles, that the sky is falling. You said the same thing about Justice Kennedy back in 1987, that he was a sexist, that he'd be bad for women, and so on and so forth, and that it's essentially crying wolf on every single Republican nominee on this high court. What do you think about that?
Senator McConnell can't have it both ways. He can't tell his base that he's keeping his word to fill the federal courts with conservative jurists and then chide us and say, well, they aren't that conservative. We know better. These were carefully selected and screened by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation to make sure they checked all the boxes before they were even in the running.
But even Elena Kagan hired this guy to go teach over at Harvard, so he can't be that bad.
Listen, you have a very, most people at the school have a very great variety when it comes to professors. I wouldn't say she was endorsing his politics.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Not endorsing his politics, that has nothing to do with it. Why Elena Kagan hired him is because he is a strong jurist. He may have one view of America which is very different from Dickie Durbin's. His view of America, talking about Brett Kavanaugh, is that we need to be strong when it comes to the Constitution. Dickie Durbin clearly wants to disregard the Constitution. Dickie Durbin's out in left field on this topic, and he knows it. You want to know how devious the mainstream media is? Take NBC reporter Lee Caldwell. She tweeted this out. On Kavanaugh pick, Kennedy and Trump White House has been in negotiations for months over Kennedy's replacement. Once Kennedy received assurances that it would be Kavanaugh, his former law clerk, Kennedy felt comfortable retiring, according to a source who was told of the discussions. This tweet got media attention and leftists melted down. She's accusing the president and the Supreme Court justice of colluding. There's just one problem with this story that was told. She took it as a confirmed story before doing any research and only using one anonymous source. She has since taken the tweet down and admitted she had no actual proof. But the damage was already done with the thousands of likes and retweets. The mainstream media will stop at nothing to tear down anything and everything this president does. Joining me now is managing editor for the Media Research Center, Brittany Hughes. Brittany, great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me back. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, Brittany. So, look, this is something we see from reporters all the time now. Back in the day when I was working in the mainstream media, I used to have bosses that demanded 2, 3, sometimes even 4 sources. They would want to know the name of the anonymous source before I went forward with anything. Now it seems like you throw anything against the wall and just hope it sticks.
Yeah, so apparently this is what passes for journalism in 2018. And you're exactly right. Over at the Media Research Center for NRATV, where I'm the managing editor, we actually don't allow stories to run on our website based on anonymous sources. I even tell our interns as soon as they come in, don't you dare write anything based on anonymous sources. I mean, how many times have we been told that John Kelly's on his way out? Like at least 14. So the idea that a reporter for NBC, someone who people look to actually present facts, would throw this out there as a fact. I mean, this wasn't even just based on an anonymous source. This was based on a source who was told of a discussion. I mean, we're playing the telephone game at this point. She didn't cite this source. She gave absolutely no proof whatsoever that what she was putting out there was true. And then she ended up coming back and saying, oh, well, my tweet might have suggested something that wasn't quite right. No, you tweeted misinformation. By the time you took it down, the damage had been done. People had ran with it. I mean, everybody from just your average Joes on Twitter all the way up to, high-level officials at other media outlets were running with this conspiracy theory that Kennedy and Trump got together, picked Kavanaugh, that the other names that had been floated for SCOTUS nominee were just simply covers, and that Kennedy only agreed to retire after he was satisfied that his former law clerk would be his replacement. You don't make those kinds of allegations without incredible amounts of proof. And for an NBC reporter to put this out there and for other NBC reporters to run with it and to spread the rumor, I think is just it. I mean, it's no wonder the American people have lost all faith in the media.
Well, the fact that other reporters then took it and ran with it shows you that they have a serious problem with news management at NBC as well, because they should have been asking questions of this reporter. But the bottom line is, I think the editors and producers at NBC wanted this to be true. And they figured they would throw it out there and let the damage be done, and then quietly walk it back, which she deletes it, and then figured, oh, nothing, no harm, no foul. In the end, though, the damage was already done.
That's exactly right. You saw the same exact thing happen a couple of weeks ago when it was immigration, which is interesting that story has just totally fallen out of headlines now that, we've got another apocalypse in the form of a Trump SCOTUS nominee. But you saw it even with immigration, lie after lie after lie that the media then had to walk back. But by that point, you're right, the damage has already been done. The American public, or at least certain segments of the American public, have already bought into this narrative. I mean, ABC ran an entire story last week about how Trump never actually lost 1,500 kids, that was a total and complete lie, but saying that it was justified because it actually brought to light a bigger story. So you've got a media that not only is putting out fake news while slamming the president for criticizing fake news, they're actually justifying it at this point because you're exactly right. They want these things to be true. The left is actually kind of ticked off that America isn't falling apart. They've predicted that we're all going to die at least a dozen times by this point. And I think they're kind of upset that we all haven't, that America is still here and that it's actually doing pretty well. So they're going going to fling out these conspiracy theories, and they know that if they end up having to say, well, that wasn't entirely true, at that point, that admission doesn't matter. The rumor's already out there. People already believe what they want to believe, and it's done. This is an attack on a president. It's not about facts. It's not about getting the information correct. It's the same thing that happened after the shooting at the Capitol Gazette, throwing out rumors that this was because of President Trump's comments about the press and them being the enemy of the American people. None of that ended up being true. But of course, they threw it out there without any facts, and it's done now. And frankly, again, this is why the American people do not trust the media. This is why the president is very critical of the media, and they only have to blame themselves.
Yeah, they surely do. I think some of the times when they use these anonymous sources, they are literally just making up the source, that there is no source that exists.
Well, and that does beg the question, and that, again, is why MRC-TV refuses to run stories based on anonymous sources. Look, just because somebody told you something doesn't necessarily make it true. Even if you give them the benefit of the doubt that they did hear from somebody that something happened, again, who is your source? What credibility does your source have if you don't actually name your source, if they're not willing to go on the record
Brittany, though, I will say
with
this.
their name?
I will say this, and I'm a firm believer of this. Hard and fast blanket rules never, ever work for me, because there are things on either side that can happen. If you have a reporter that you trust at MRC, and they have used anonymous sources in the past that have always turned out to be true, I wouldn't blanket say do away with anonymous sources. When I worked in media, I had a few sources. They were anonymous. I would always label them as high-ranking inside this department, just enough to let you know that I knew where they were coming from, but not enough to identify them. And they were always right. When that source, after 5 years, gave me a story tip over and over and over again, and they were always right, I had no problems using that anonymous source. A new anonymous source was where I always was very fearful, and then I would try to go get other sources to confirm. But I don't like a blanket rule of no anonymous sources, because I'll use them on this program too, from people I trust.
Well, and there are varying levels, and we understand this in the journalism world, about your sources, about whether or not you're getting something on background, whether you can attribute it to a high-ranking official. There have been times where I have talked to numerous people, particularly under the Obama administration, for example, border agents that didn't necessarily want their name out there. But they were perfectly fine with being identified as border agents or top-ranking officials in DHS or what have you. So when you can attribute your source, when you can attribute that information to somebody who is actually credible, that's a little bit of a different level. When you're talking about, well, I'm going to cite this person as an anonymous source, and they're the janitor who heard it from the roofing guy who heard it through a window. Again, this is where you start really getting into some questions. When you say, well, I heard this from a source who was told about conversations, which is where Caldwell attributed her information. That's not a source. That's somebody who heard something who heard something. So she even admitted that, even if her information had been correct, her source was extremely questionable at best. This is not journalism. This is not reporting. If she felt that she had a nugget that was really a big story, she should have gotten the facts, dug a little bit deeper, figured out if she was right, and then come forward with that information. But to just toss it out there like this, again, this is not journalism. This is why people don't trust it.
It's irresponsible. That's exactly what it is. Brittany Hughes, I always like having these discussions because it's fascinating to talk about the process that it goes to put news on the right way. And I appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Hollywood is up to its old tricks, only now it is upping the ante and the rhetoric against conservatives and particularly the NRA. Take the new movie, The Purge. I call it a direct assault on the Tea Party, the NRA, and Donald Trump supporters. The premise of this movie is a one night, every year, crime is legal. That's right, anything, murder included. America is purged of its violent tendencies in one night. That's the theme. The producers portray groups like the Tea Party and the NRA as right-wing racist extremists who want nothing more than the elimination of all minorities, to play into the rhetoric that's spewing out on TV stations across the country now. It is an outrageous premise, one designed not to just sway your opinion about conservative groups, but it's meant to make you hate them. These ultra-whacked groups in the movie, you hear me? In the movie, these ultra-whacked groups should be hated. But far too many Americans who go and see this movie will not make the distinction between what is real and what is fiction. Of course, the idea for this night of chaos comes from the group's New Founding Fathers of America, a patriotic bunch who believe in God and guns. Sounds just like the Tea Party, right? Except they're violent and evil in the movie. But the producers take it further. They make all these groups out to be racist killers as an example of what happens when patriotism gets out of hand. I will tell you this, patriots want safety and security. We are nothing like those portrayed in the movie, and we provide, with the help of guns, not the threat of violence, we provide safety to those around us. But Hollywood purge producers don't understand any of this. So they make movies to push a political agenda aimed at destroying freedom. This is the left using Hollywood as a tool, and this movie is proof. Joining me now is someone who follows the hypocrisy of Hollywood very closely, Christian Toto. Christian Toto, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
What do you think of this movie? Did you get a chance to see it?
Yeah, no, this is part of a franchise, and this is the fourth film in the series, all with the same theme, which you mentioned, The Purge, where 12 hours, everything is legal. Now, the franchise up until this point has been certainly left-leaning. They've bashed the Tea Party, they've bashed the NRA, and they've tried to bash conservatives and Christians, by the way. The last film was rather gross in the way it depicted some people of faith. The new film is an out-and-out assault on President Trump. It's like every MSNBC conspiracy theory jammed into one movie. It's pretty amazing. And, it's going to be successful because they kept the budget very low. This is from a producer who loves to do that. He keeps the budget low. So even if it makes a decent amount of money, they can keep churning out these products. And because they make them so quickly, they can jump on more recent news, more recent trends. So you've got a dash of Charlottesville. You've got, police brutality against people of color. It's everything you said it is and worse. And there's no hiding behind the fact that this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to spread a certain agenda, and they're doing it in as coarse a way as possible.
And that's what I think's happening here. I think you have a left-wing producer who certainly wants to make some money. Clearly, by keeping the budget low, he learned to keep the cost low and sell it high, and you're going to make some money off of this. But I believe it's going beyond just the fact that he finds all this stuff entertaining and it fits his ideology. I think it's really more devious than that. I think that Hollywood and those on the left are now conspiring together to push this kind of nonsense to ultimately twist the minds of moderate Americans who were too dopey to realize that this is a movie and it's not real life, and that they're not pulling fact into fiction.
Well, a couple of thoughts here. One, the film critics, even those who don't like the movie, it's certainly a flawed film on other avenues, they're cheering on the whole anti-Trump motion. They're saying this is brave, this is bold. The series has never been as political as it is now. So they're doing all they can to kind of ramp up the enthusiasm for this particular franchise. And by the way, there's a Purge TV show coming out this fall, I believe on USA Network. So the story continues. But listen, there's no accidents here. This is what they do. This is what they try to do. And it's as blunt as possible. And, the best way truly to send a message in a movie is to be more subtle, is to kind of weave it into the storytelling so that you enjoy the film. You go, oh, wait a minute, let me think about this on the way home, driving home from the theater. They don't want that. The lack of nuance on the left today, and certainly on the storytelling side of things, is getting more pronounced, where they need to feel better. They need to write these stories. They need to be very obtuse about it, because otherwise they don't get that emotion out. It's all virtue signaling. But I do agree. I mean, this creates a culture that is really nasty. And it's hard to walk away from this film with any sort of positive feelings for anyone right of center, and that's not an accident.
Well, there's no nuance in this movie at all. I mean, they hit you over the head with it. And look, I understand that producers and directors are going to take where they come from in life and want to make movies about that and maybe push some kind of ideology. I get it. That's why you go to the movies. What is bold and brave, though, would be for Hollywood to actually support a conservative movie with a conservative director pushing conservative values. That's bold. It isn't bold to go bash Donald Trump in Hollywood.
Well, here's what's going on right now. There's a movie being made. It's a pro-life movie loosely based on the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision. Well, they're having a heck of a time getting their movie made because different universities are not allowing them to shoot on campus. People are fleeing the production for multiple reasons, including peer pressure. This is from the Hollywood Reporter saying that actors and crew members are leaving this particular project because of peer pressure. So if you're in a movie that's right of center in any kind of fashion, well, that's not going to stand. And you're going to hear it from your friends and colleagues within the Hollywood community. And maybe you shouldn't take that project. Sure, it's a paying gig, but hey, you know what? They're not going to be happy about you doing that. And maybe it's going to impact your future work. That's what's going on in Hollywood now. So the rare conservative movies, they don't want them either.
Yeah, unbelievable. Great reporting, Christian and Toto. That's the place to find all your stuff. I appreciate you coming on, my man. Hollywood and Toto it is. I'm Grant Stinchfield. That'll do it for us here at NRATV. We will see you back here tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks for watching.
You're watching NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.